Heather. Thanks for sitting down with me. Let's start off just talking a little bit about who you are. You come to church here at Rush Creek. Tell me a little bit about you and your family.
Well, I am married to my husband for 22 years. We have 4 children, 3 of which are neurodivergent. 1 might be neurodivergent, and we have just really fell in love with this church and the way they love people.
Yeah, of course. So tell me what it's like a little bit to raise kids who are neurodivergent or who are on the spectrum. Do you have any special challenges?
I think one of the things I was thinking about this week, and it's not that it's like a better or a worse child raising experience, it's just more. There's more unknowns, there's more questions, there's more regulation problems, there's just different. They're different. They don't always know how to put into words what they're feeling. And so it's a lot of trying to stay ahead of what is difficult for them, especially managing their day-to-day and their social interactions.
Yeah. Do you think that kids on the spectrum or kids who are neurodivergent, do you think they have any special challenges coming to a place like this?
I think they absolutely do. In fact, most families with kids on the spectrum don't come because it is a very overwhelming place for those individuals. We have quite a bit of, it's overstimulating. I mean, if you think about everything that's going on that the kids are not used to on a day-to-day basis, they're gonna have a lot of music, they're gonna have a lot of voices, and frankly, a lot of smells. It's not that people are inherently smelly, but they're very alert to all the smells. So 100 people with very different scents may be overwhelming to their senses. And a lot of times, I know one of my kids said that it's hard for him to remain quiet during the service. And so those are the challenges that we face.
How have you seen your family and kids that your kids bring? How have you seen those kids fit in here, specifically at Liberty United Methodist Church?
I think one of the things that makes Liberty United Methodist Church unique is that they are willing to find places of service for all individuals, whether they are neurodivergent or not. And so as my children have felt accepted for who they are and with their strengths and their weaknesses, they're comfortable inviting their friends, saying, hey, I know that it's hard sometimes to go to these social situations, but I promise it's going to be okay here, and you're going to be accepted for who you are and loved for who you are. And so they're very comfortable each week going to their youth group services and just having their own sense of identity within the church.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So something I didn't tell you before, I have statistics for you. It seems like around our church, a lot of the other churches I've talked to are telling me they have 10% of their students now who are maybe on the spectrum. So out of the 40 or so students that we have 10 kids on the spectrum and another 5 or 7 that are neurodivergent outside of those, which means we're hitting close to 50%. I want to know, why do you think so many students like that are coming to our youth group?
I think it's really interesting because it is a huge need within the community. I regularly get people reaching out to me saying, does anybody have a recommendation of where my kids can go to church? We have been asked to leave churches. My kids want to know somewhere. I want to be able to take them to a place where I feel safe leaving them, despite, and I guess I would say in spite of what may be perceived as different. And I think that once the church creates a place where these kids feel loved and supported and free to be who they are, the fact that they're choosing an additional social engagement during the week, in addition to school or whatever else is happening, is really telling of the kind of environment that we're creating as a body of Christ.
That's great. Do you think there are any misconceptions about working with students with special needs or students who are on the spectrum?
I think because the spectrum is so large that it's very difficult to know exactly what to expect from anybody who is on the spectrum or neurodivergent. I think that we have those that have lower support needs, your children that are more verbal, communicative, it's easy to discount that they may be struggling with blocking out all the stimulation that may be happening around them, or controlling, verbal stimming or anything where they might make these noises. On the heavier side of support needs, very high support needs, I think as a church we have a inclination to assume they don't understand what's going on. to not believe that just because they can't speak does not mean they can't hear. And it doesn't mean that they don't have a higher cognitive ability than you may give them credit for. So as a church, I think presuming competence is a really important thing. And also at the same time, holding space for those differences so that people can feel supported and loved where they are.
That's great. So last question. What can the people who attend our church do to help support the ministry to kids who are both neurodivergent or not neurodivergent?
I think the one thing that people can do is just talk to them directly. Sometimes, I think one of the tricky parts is that at least some of my children that are on the spectrum get anxious talking to adults because they can't predict what the conversation is going to look like. I think maybe in youth group, they feel a little bit safer because there's going to be a pivot of, okay, they didn't know what that is. Let's go video games. Let's go, and so you can find common ground with those kids a little easier. I think your typical person is just to know and get comfortable with the silence. I think we want to fill silence. And so when kids on the spectrum don't know how to respond, they're processing what's happening. And so if you're just patient and give them time to process what you're asking, to think about an answer, and hopefully they really just don't want to disappoint you. I mean, they really don't. They don't want to say something they're not supposed to say, so they just won't say anything. And so I think the more that we just hold space and make space, and that if it seems to be something they're tricked about, you can say, so have you played video games? But you don't have to fill the silence immediately. You just give them time, to process what is happening, and just love on them. I think they want to be accepted exactly as they are. Yeah.
And I think we've talked before, but I have members of my own looser family that are on the spectrum, family members who have struggled to find places to go to church when they had kids that were growing up on the spectrum. And I think the biggest takeaway that I've gained from all my years of doing youth ministry and just interacting with all kinds of people is that everybody wants to be treated like a person.
Yes.
And I think that the more we can do that, regardless of what the extenuating circumstances are of that person's neurodivergency or not, I think when we treat people like people and when we love people the way that God commands us to love people, I think that's really where we see ministry happen.
Yes.
No matter who they are.
Agreed. 100%.
Agreed. Okay.